Hi bunnies! Welcome to part 2 of my opinions of 2024. I hope this video finds you well. So this video is mostly going to talk on my favorite K-pop groups and how I felt about them through the year and a few groups that I've just kept my eye on throughout the year. Before we get started, here's a disclaimer. Disclaimer. These videos are my personal opinions. Nothing that will come out my mouth is going to be 100% factual, but I'm more than happy to learn in the case that one of my opinions is factually incorrect. But I do have the right to speak my mind. With that being said, let's get started. Number 1. Twice's music and releases will never disappoint me. Okay, so I'm going to keep this opinion short because I want this to be a separate video on its own. But to start off, I've been a fan of Twice since debut, but I didn't really start watching their outside content and following them until their Lane Coaster Part 1 release. And since then, it's actually been a real pleasure being a fan of them and seeing all their triumphs that they've had since then. And 2024, in my opinion, has been an amazing year for them musically. We got another full Japanese album, a Nayeon comeback, Chewy solo, One Spark, With Youth, I Got You, Misamo's comeback, and Strategy. My girls have had a crazy year in releases, but each release is truly a pleasure to listen and take in. And I really like that we started sentimental, considering that this is their 9th year being a group, and it ended on being, pun intended, strategical, and with a collab with Megan Thee Stallion nonetheless. I don't care what anyone says, but this is what all groups should ultimately strive for, which is longevity, because they're still fresh while being unique to themselves. I know some people have had some opinions on Chewy's solo and why she was even doing one, but Twice are at a point in their careers where they have the stability to explore and try something new. And I personally love how her solo was great for her to explore being a solo artist and have her family at her side to support her. At the same time, Nayeon's ABCD is the perfect comeback after Pop because it fully establishes her solo artistry and is added in Twice's discography at large. I feel like this opinion and my explanations of this is all over the place, but ultimately I love how they have grown and just show real friendship to one another, and it shows in their music. Their division that they're under in JYP will pay for how they barely promote them, but Strategy is a step in the right direction for this new era that they're entering in, and I simply cannot wait to see what's to come next for them in 2025 and the years to come. Number 2. Zero Base One spearhead 5th generation boy groups. As everyone knows, or at least I'm hoping people know, Zero Base One came from the survival show Boys Planet. And I don't care what anyone says, this is one of the best survival show lineups to ever exist. Keywords, I said one of, so don't get your panties in the twist trying to bring up Hyphen or Eyes One. But anyway, this lineup of boys genuinely could not be any better. And they personally give K-pop fans everything they could possibly want. And there's 4 reasons why I believe this. Number 1, they're all talented. Number 2, they're fresh and give a nice change in what boy groups typically go for. By this, I mean that their music is easy to listen to, their music appeals to multiple audiences if you listen to their B-sides, and they genuinely appeal to both men and women in their fan service and how they react with the opposite or same sex. Number 3, you can tell that they love each other and have fun with one another and bring some of the original fun back into the K-pop world. And lastly, number 4, they challenge the status quo with their existence. Okay, so with number 1, if you watch part 1 of this video, it'll make more sense what I'm talking about, so I'm just going to skip explaining this one. But as for number 2, when Zero Base One came out with In Bloom, they started off literally as losers. But the song and the debut itself was absolutely amazing, and honestly, it kind of felt like watching TXT's debut, given that it was fresh and new, considering that most of their singers were doing more darker concepts and, for lack of a better word, noise music. This was a great hook into their music because all of them are great at what they do, and it shows on the stage. And looking at them, I get excited thinking about what they're going to do next. Then, of course, their TikTok content is typically Gen Z memes and humor, so they're funny, and they have easy music that's pleasing. Melting Point gave us this Diva, and Crash, which was met with mixed emotions, actually ended up doing good in establishing who exactly their fan base is, because once they actually weeded out the people who wanted Zero Base One to be the same throughout their entire careers, they're able to experiment and listen to the fans who stayed. So when Feel the Pop came out and Yura Yura came out, fans got a little bit of both. So when Good So Bad came out, fans definitely got everything that they asked for and wanted, especially if you listen to the B-sides. Even in the way Zero Base One interacts with fans and their colleagues, they're very sweet, funny, and respectful. Plenty of people in the LGBTQ community adore Zero Base One, and it's because they treat our community with respect. Seeing how Hanbin's main dance style is whacking, Jiwoong's past as a BL actor, and whatever Taeran and Jong Hao are, is comforting because they've been in those spaces and respect those spaces. Even when Hanbin is emceeing, female idols are physically a lot comfortable to the boys, and I like to think it's because the boys just naturally make people comfortable around them. Even with male fans, they make an effort to really acknowledge them, and I think it's great. Number 3, the boys love each other. There is not a day that goes by where I don't hear them talking about one another or genuinely standing up for one another. Recently, Yujin and Hao went to see an exhibit, and non-fans thought it would be appropriate to say they should have been practicing instead of enjoying a nice day out. And Tae and Gonuk immediately made shady comments about those people in defense. Alongside that, Ricky's mistreatment by Wickwon is very obvious, especially when you get into the group and you stay in the group. But Gyubin is always there to assure fans that Ricky is doing okay. Though we wish we could hear it from Ricky's mouth, it's nice to know that the rest of the members, and the one that Ricky is arguably close to the most, is looking out for him. Alongside that, their love for each other shows while they're out having fun at award shows and just general appearances. There's this clip of Tere where he's looking at Hanbin and trying to make a funny face just to get Hanbin to smile, and it's so sweet to see how big he actually does smile. Even more so, this clip to Gunnock rolling a trophy is so silly, but he's not ashamed and the fan base doesn't berate him for it. And lastly, number 4. Their existence challenges the status quo of K-pop at the moment. Jong Hao is the only trainee to have won a Korean survival show as the first place winner. Politics aside, that is such a massive accomplishment because of how he, as a Chinese man, has to face xenophobia in Korea as is, and has already changed the trajectory of his personal life by pursuing a career in music. This is a big threat to Mnet. As you can tell, they want to replicate the success that in their eyes was not supposed to happen. Hanbin was anticipated to win and be first, but the public's sheer adoration for Jong Hao won people over, and now Mnet wants to try to create a group that's strictly for China and strictly for Korea as a means to not accept that you can please both markets without having to separate them from one another. Alongside that, Jung is the eldest in the group at 26, and Yujin is the youngest at 16. However, most of the boys fall in the early 20s/late teens range, which in my opinion is the most appropriate age for all of them to debut and be in the K-pop industry. Most companies now truly believe 14 and 15 are the appropriate ages to debut someone, and that debuting past 21 is basically a death sentence. The boys' age ranges show that you can have mostly older members, despite the fact that none of them are even old, and still produce fresh and fun music and have a youthful image at the same time. Of course, being 16 is still kind of questionable, but at least he's not in a group where everyone are kids and immature, and he's in a kids raising kids situation. He has 8 older brothers that he can rely on and protect him, and a pretty active mother as a parent to make sure that he's okay. Zero Base One's existence and success is a threat to the status quo, and I love that for them because they bring something new to the table while being authentically themselves. I think because of this, they spearhead 5th generation boy groups because they still have some things from 4th gen while still doing something new and creative. And if you really look at more 5th gen groups, you can tell how more groups are experimenting and getting creative, and it falls and it flows into this new generation of K-pop groups. Number 3, ATs are everything that people could ask for in a K-pop boy group. I want to start this by saying I apologize to all of the ATs that I've spoken to in the past that have told me I would literally love them when I just said I was just going to stay in my own lane and keep it to myself. Because this whole year, all of 2024, I've gotten to know ATs, I attended a concert, I've gotten closer to a great friend of mine because of it, and I've gotten everything I could ever ask for since getting into this group. This group delivers on quite literally everything that K-pop fans beg and complain and ask for. And there's 4 main things that I think they do exceedingly well. Number 1, they play a role in music production and creativity. Number 2, they're amazing performers. Number 3, they genuinely love one another. And number 4, they have their own personal style. Number 1, my favorite thing to watch of any K-pop group is behind the scenes content. There's something so cool about seeing how a comeback works or what went into their debut. And something that I know a lot of K-pop fans have talked about, especially in the past couple of years, are groups that self-produce and make a lot of decisions on their comebacks. ATEEZ are a great example of this because when you look at BTS content of them, they're genuinely competing with each other to get a specific part, or a part was written with them in mind, or you can just see how their brain works when making decisions on what they wear, how they dance a specific way, how they act, and how they move forward to portray a story, which leads into number 2. They are amazing performers. I'm always going to stand by this opinion that most K-pop choreo always looks like a lot of nothing, but as long as there's energy behind it, it's fine. I personally don't care for choreography most of the time because I'm not a dancer by any means. But one thing I can always appreciate is a good performance because I love performing. Attending their concert cemented this opinion for me because, by God, y'all, the theatrics of it all was amazing. It's nice being able to enjoy it on a broadcast or a live or a stage, but seeing that passion on stage live is a game changer. They really stick with their lore and their concept through and through. It felt like watching Broadway. Like, the acting is insane, and the way they immerse themselves as the character is amazing. And comparing part 1 and part 2 is where the involvement in their process shines because you know they're authentic in their portrayal because they literally call the shots for whatever they want. If you really want a good performance of them, I would highly recommend watching their Coachella set. That is a 40 to 50 minute set list of all their biggest strengths as performers. And that leads me to number 3. They truly love each other. The support of one another shows primarily in their performances because they have to act with one another. It's one thing to go through the emotions, but it's another to immerse yourself as a character and act as that character with, let's be honest here, your coworker, who if they're going through the emotions too, it just won't convey as well. There was a conversation 2 years ago on which groups are besties and which ones are coworkers. Now, we don't know these people or their relationships to one another, but it'd be a lie to say that we all prefer groups that hate each other, or we like groups that just don't like each other and like coworkers. We like groups that genuinely feel like a family and love each other. The ATEEZ soulmate lore that they have with one another is crazy because it feels like they're genuinely were meant to be together and united. And even when you look outside the typical pairs like Mingi and Yuno or Uyong and San, you can just see how special all their relationships are to each other, like Mingi and Jongho or San and Songhwa. It's just so nice to think and imagine that they literally deserve each other. And this last reason is a little bit more of a superficial one, but number 4 is that they all have their own unique personal style. Everyone has a bias for a reason, because that's the person you like the most, it's the person who represents you the most, you lean towards, or someone you just aspire to be. With ATEEZ, it's the same thing, given that their individuality is so pronounced from what they focus on the most and what they like when it comes to their fashion sense. I personally hate how some idols are pushed to the side when it comes to fashion events simply because their company thinks that they don't need it. I'm looking at you, JYP. So it's great seeing Dolce & Gabbana praising San and acknowledging that his femininity as a man adds to their brand, or Songwa and Isabelle Marant wearing a woman's dress and fully expressing himself past what he was limited to, and Hongjoong with Balmain and Vivienne Westwood are just great because you can see that they embody what these brands represent, along with the fact that that's just their natural style and that's just their swag. Like, I love that for them. Ultimately, I'm still a girl group fan because I don't really care for most boy groups give, but ATEEZ truly have given me a great experience in the same way that Zero Base One does for me. Oh, and before I close this point, they are such a respectful group. Their previous releases have been very Latin and hip-hop inspired, and I really appreciate how they respect our communities and the music our communities create as they do it for their music. It doesn't feel like they're trying to make a spectacle of what they're doing and trying to be out the box. It just feels fitting. And I certainly can't wait for whatever they do next. Number 4. Weki Meki deserves so much better. Okay, so me personally, I'm more of a big group listener, like groups from bigger companies. But the quote-unquote Nugu groups that I do listen to, they have my heart. So when I tell y'all Weki Meki's disbanding hurt me so badly, I am not lying. The way they disbanded was completely expected from how we just went out basically 2 years not hearing about anything that they were doing for it and what they were doing in their careers. Fortunately, the girls are in great places and are doing even greater things, but I'd be lying if I said I liked how they went out. Coincidentally was a cute song, don't get me wrong, even the music video was cute, but there's so many things that make how they were disfavored and mistreated by their company obvious. The main things being number 1, no choreography, 2, filmed on an iPhone, and 3, leaving keelings in the dark on what they're doing in the 2 years without release. Having no choreography means there is no stage. There is no going on any music shows, and that means that interactions with fans and seeing fans support you is more disconnected. Lightsticks serve not as a way to represent the group that you're supporting, but also a reminder to the idols that they have fans that love them and care about them. Weki Meki the whole time had to communicate to fans either through their socials or through whatever event their company had them attend, so it still felt disconnected because you basically just gave us a music video and nothing else to look at, which leads me into how the music video itself was filmed on an iPhone. Now, there's nothing wrong with using the iPhone. In fact, New Jeans has done it and aespa has done it, and it can be done right. But the difference between that and Weki Meki is the fact that they couldn't even be bothered to give the girls any real equipment, and that also led the girls to filming the video by themselves with minimal staff. The lack of care gives the impression to me that this music video was never supposed to happen. It was meant to be a silent disbandment, which is so unfair to them, because instead of giving them a proper send-off, you didn't even want to give them a send-off, period. Which leads me to my last point on how we as fans were left in the dark on what they were up to in the 2 whole years that they did not release anything. To put this into perspective for those who don't listen to smaller groups, Imagine and Hypen dropped a somewhat decent mini album. The album wasn't promoted well, so half of the fan base didn't even know that there was a promotion, and it basically made no noise. And then for 2 whole years, you suddenly hear that they have a comeback after having nothing. You're excited, you're anticipating it, and it's a disbandment song. So now you have that in your mind. Imagine the disappointment when the disbandment song is literally held together with Elmer's glue and duct tape, showing that the company that they're under never cared to make use of them. What happened to Weki Meki is unfortunate, and it's common when you like smaller groups from small companies. I can understand why there's a lack of resource considering that the company that they're in, but fans are allowed to be hurt seeing how their company didn't care about the girls. Weki Meki are the reasons why we have relay dances, and relay dances that are polished. They're trendsetters in their own right. Picky Picky, as a release, should have been taken advantage of, and they did for a little while, but then they gave up on them for no reason, and it shows how they gave up and discarded the girls. It's sad knowing how those girls spent a good portion of their childhood and young adulthood becoming and being an idol, and when they ran their course in their company's mind, they just get disrespected. Luckily, the girls are living very fulfilling lives, and I'm very happy for them. But man, is it so sad knowing that they went out the way they did. I wish disbandments in the future were and are handled with more respect, even if you come from a smaller company. I really wish the companies that take certain artists at least try to be respectful to their groups and their fans when the time of disbandment actually comes. Number 5, NMIXX have the opportunity to be incredible. So, I mentioned NMIXX's discography in part 1 of this video, but I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth about the FE304 releases here. To start off, FE304 started off with Soñar as a pre-release, and I cannot describe how good of a choice this was. I like to think a lot of JYP groups mirror each other, so it makes sense that because ITZY and TWICE were doing pre-releases or the double title track idea, it'd be a good idea for NMIXX to do the same, and so they did. Soñar was a great pre-release because it did one of my favorite things, which was dress them all in the same outfits, same hair, and fully polished the mixed pop sound, given that they were finished promoting Party O'Clock and Roller Coaster, which didn't have the mixed pop sound, and for fans that literally needed to relax over this, like they're acting as if they're forgetting their roots. But anyway, that's a sidebar. Soñar solidified what mixed pop was meant to be, and did more so in a better way than DICE did. It sounded like it was meant to be there, and that worked in their favor, because when Dash as the title track came and released the switch sounds, it made it sound like both the switches in Soñar and Dash mixed and went together. So it actually added to an overall cohesiveness of the release in general. And to take this a step further for Soñar, they utilized the fact that the girls were practicing Spanish and made that song their debut in the Latin market, which I think is a community that doesn't get represented in K-pop or necessarily sought after. So it's a nice change to see that they didn't tap into the Japanese market first, like most groups do, but tapped into the Latin community market, which again works in their favor because the debut, the girls basically, especially Haewon as the leader, made it very apparent that they were practicing Spanish. So it made sense for them to try this market first, then the Japanese market or the Chinese market. I think this decision is incredibly unique of them because most companies don't really think to do this or really see that market as having any meaningful value. So this may be another video in the future, but this affirms my personal belief that out of all the big companies, JYP groups develop the most organically because they're always trying something new and different and taking their time to build core fan bases. This growth for MX from their debut not being liked to suddenly building a fan base that loves them and supports them is amazing, and it'll go up from here because they have everything a good K-pop should have and that fans ask for. They have an amazing dance line, an amazing singing line, and they're just passionate and love what they do. They're trendsetters, and I think Squad knows that and can finally understand what they need to do for the girls musically and creatively. I think the girls have the opportunity to do something great and amazing, and I'm rooting for them. So please, I beg, announce a world tour, I beg. Number 6. If you want a group to be popular internationally, you can't overly police them or punish them in the way you would domestically. Okay, so this opinion in general applies to groups that I don't concretely listen to, but the issues that have come with those groups. I know this video is mostly the groups that I like, but this opinion has become very apparent to me when I look at these 3 groups: Black Swan, Cat's Eye, and Rise. In my opinion, Black Swan and Rise are K-pop groups, but Cat's Eye is not. However, what ties these 3 groups together is the company's desired demographic that they want popularity from. Black Swan's rollout was an amazing release, and I absolutely loved it, and so did Korea at large, despite what certain fans may think. Upon their release, they actually received a lot of domestic popularity and a boost in international support, at least from the fans that have a brain and don't fetishize Asians. The girls primarily communicate in mostly English, but their art and music is Korean, and that's what makes them a K-pop group. What makes people think that they aren't is how they're free in what they do and what they say on lives and the way they interact with one another. Now, no matter how you try to spin it, there's always going to be a different and inherently more strict way that K-pop idols have to interact with fans and each other. So when we have groups like Black Swan that don't necessarily have that restriction, people dismiss them as being K-pop because they have this freedom that we just know that most idols don't have. This is uniquely exemplified by Cat's Eye, given how when you look at their lives, they are very free in what they say, minus muting themselves or just self-censoring themselves for the sake of the company that they're under. Compared to Black Swan, all their songs are in English, but they follow the K-pop formula of song making, which makes people see them as a K-pop group when they're not. So in short, Cat's Eye aren't K-pop, but they, as HYBE has intended them to be, are aiming for global popularity, so they aren't held to overly strict standards because of that. And because that's just not what the global market cares for. But Black Swan, and despite their freedom, because they're aiming for more domestic popularity, they're most sort of looking to be less punished, I guess. Hopefully that made some sense, but I mostly say all this to say and talk about why SM's desire to make Rise a global group is and will ultimately fail. To global fans, most of us do not care for dating or smoking or vaping, and most of us don't consider it a scandal because celebrities from our culture do it all the time, if not worse things. I summarized what happened to Sunghan in part 1, but in more detail, from his pre-debut days, roughly in his high school years, he dated a girl and had a picture of him and her sharing a mutual kiss while being together at a movie theater. The issue is that he dated a girl. Mind you, he's of school age. This is normal behavior for his age group. And if we're looking at it from a wider lens, the two broke up because he wanted to be an idol and she wasn't interested, and this all happened pre-debut. Information like this should not be bothersome actions because there's nothing inherently bad with being in a school relationship, especially given how he didn't abuse her, or there's no instance of her saying or showing that she was uncomfortable being with him during their relationship. This quote-unquote issue is non-existent to global fans because it's just normal to us. Because in a morally correct understanding of his situation, he did nothing wrong but be a teenage boy. I'd be able to understand if he abused his girlfriend and if he was truly a horrible individual to women, but there's no clues or indications that he is a bad person or a bad boyfriend. Which leads me to how his punishment being forced to witness all those reefs that people put thousands of dollars on and found legal loopholes to keep them protected, and then purposely make the announcement while the rest of Rise aren't physically with him to console him, destroys any chance for Rise to be popular globally. Now, unfortunately, K-pop fans have literally no backbone and would rather boycott dumb stuff instead of boycott for the right reason, so who knows, SM may get exactly what they want in the end. But in that moment, they made a grave mistake by punishing Sunghan for the freedom he had as a human before a contract. There's no real reason to enable this behavior from fans, and it's more pathetic to make him a solo artist instead of defending him and standing by your decision to keep him in the group. Cat's Eye will always have global popularity because even while they're being authentic, they're not going to get punished for it. And it's the same for Black Swan. To all OT6 prizes, especially for those of y'all who sent Reese, I pray for your karma to come. You don't ever wish death on somebody and expect for your life to just be untouched. And to all OT7 prizes, y'all are going to have a real backbone and boycott for real. Pirating is 10 times easier than it was 10 years ago, so make do with what you got if you have to listen to their music. The only power we as K-pop fans have at the end of the day is our money, so we have to show that. Number 7. Girl groups musically dominate everything. Congratulations! You made it to the end of the video. Here's a cookie. This is my last opinion for the video, and this one's going to be short because I'm going to be real honest. I'm just going to be regurgitating my second point from my first video, but girl groups are always going to be better musically, and they're always going to dominate musically everything. I do not care if you are the biggest boy group listener ever. A lot of releases from boy groups either have degraded or just lack longevity, and they're only good for the moment that it was released. The reason why, in my opinion, a lot of boy group fans think that y'all's face music dominate the industry is simply because you interact with their personalities more just because you watch their content more. And the real implications of what that means is for another time. But anyway, girl groups have always been established musically and have always established musically what each generation is going to be and do. And boy groups who stand out only stand out because they're doing something unique that the girls just aren't doing. Now, I understand that I'm a girl group listener and I sound very biased, but when you really sit with the fact that for the first time in 4 years, not a singular boy group has hit number 1 on Melon, the main music chart in Korea, it can change your perspective to see just how powerful girl groups are musically. I dive into this opinion more, but I'm going to save that for when I do my video on Twice and their evolution in their artistry. All I gotta say is definitely try your best to see what your faves do successfully in an ever-changing industry like this one, and really ask yourself if they add any musical value, especially if they're a boy group. With that being said, thank you so much for listening and watching, and stay tuned for more. Bye!